They finally opened the classified files, didn't they? The folders with red stamps and blacked-out lines. The ones they pretended never existed when you asked why everyone had their eyes on you. They pulled out psychological profiles, behavioral databases, pattern recognition programs, and fed your name into every algorithm they owned, desperate for a match, a label, any tidy explanation for what you are. At first they tried to fit you into the spy boxes, the cold calculation, the half-smile that hides a dozen exit strategies, the uncanny memory for small details others overlook. But the spies in their manuals break under isolation. They need handlers and validation from headquarters. You don't crack. You don't answer to a headquarters. Your only command center is the fortress you rebuilt in your own mind after they tried to destroy it. When the spy theory failed, they moved on to the military dossiers, special forces evaluations, and black ops profiles. They noted your discipline, the way you function on no sleep, your calm as everything around you burns, and the way you compartmentalize pain as if it were ammunition. Soldiers follow orders and fracture without a unit. You follow no one. You invented your own structure and grew stronger when your unit abandoned you. Then they scanned leader profiles, CEOs who forged empires, revolutionaries who toppled regimes with words, generals who won campaigns before breakfast. And they saw your strategic mind, the ability to think 17 moves ahead while everyone else scrambles for the next one. The gravitational pull you exert in a room, the way conversations shift when you speak, the way the weak orbit you, hoping to borrow strength. But leaders hunger for followers and legacy. They need witnesses to their greatness. You need none of that. You are your own witness, your own army, your own revolution. The reports came back stamped with a single word, a word that made their blood run cold. You matched. There was no precedent, no category, no classification that fit. You're not in their databases because beings like you don't get documented. They get buried or feared, but never understood. You are what remains when someone survives everything meant to create monsters and comes out clean, not pure, not innocent, but tempered, like a blade that's been through so much fire it can no longer rust. They tried to crack you by testing your calm next, certain that would expose a weakness. They sent provocations disguised as casual encounters and engineered situations meant to trigger anger, panic, fear, desperation. They watched as you navigated the chaos like a creature born to it, as if you'd rehearsed for this your entire life. Your heart rate barely budged, your voice never rose, your hands did not tremble. Only then did they understand. Your calm wasn't control, it was acceptance. You have died inside so many times that external threats feel like rain on armor. What unnerved them most was the way you smiled through their tests, not a nervous twitch or a counterfeit grin, but the smile of someone who sees the whole chessboard while everyone else is still learning how the pieces move. They called it sociopathy at first, but sociopaths are predictable. They have patterns, needs, holes. You are different, your emotional intelligence weaponized, intuition converted into combat training, trauma reshaped into tactical advantage. Their final assessment was clinical and terrified. Subject demonstrates unprecedented psychological architecture. Traditional behavioral models collapse when applied. Recommend immediate cessation of direct engagement. Influence fear, expanding beyond containment protocols. Threat level unquantifiable. They wanted to brand you dangerous, but even that word felt too small. You are not dangerous. You are inevitable, like gravity, like time, like the silence that follows truth, that calm of yours that made seasoned interrogators sweat. It isn't the calm of ignorance or passive meditation, it's the calm of someone who has already seen the ending, who has pre-processed every betrayal, pre-grieved every loss, and pre-accepted every possible failure, and decided none of it is worth the energy of panic. When they unleash their threats, manipulations, and psychological warfare, you simply watch it play out like a rerun you already memorized. They brought in specialists, behavioral analysts with decades of experience reading micro-expressions and decoding body language. But you don't leak information through your body because your body and mind are no longer at war. They've signed a peace treaty written in scar tissue and sealed with acceptance. You don't fidget because you have nothing to hide. You don't explain because you owe no one an explanation. You don't defend because you're not on trial. You are the verdict. Your breathing remains steady even as they pile on pressure, because you learned how to breathe underwater the day they tried to drown you in expectations. Your eyes don't dart, searching for exits, because you are the exit. You already calculated 17 ways to leave any situation, not just physically but emotionally, mentally and spiritually. You can disconnect from any person, any reality that no longer serves you, and that ability terrifies them because it proves you cannot be trapped. You wield silence like a weapon they've never encountered, not the silence of submission or confusion, but the silence of someone who knows the real violence is in waiting. You let them talk themselves into corners, reveal intentions, and expose weaknesses while you absorb every scrap of information like a black hole swallowing light. And when you finally speak, if you speak at all, your words land like precision strikes, naming what they hoped you'd never notice. They don't understand that you weren't born this way, you were forged. Every betrayal became a software update, every abandonment a system upgrade, every attempt to break you simply debugged another weakness. You didn't transcend through calm meditation or tidy therapies, you evolved through survival mathematics. They searched for a single breaking point, unaware you scattered them across 1,000 small collapses. The nights you broke at 3 a.m., the silent screams in bathroom stalls between meetings, each fracture stitched into a stronger design. You broke and rebuilt so many times that breaking became as natural as breathing. Now something stronger than bone or muscle holds you together, the gravity of your own becoming. Psychologists call your emotional regulation abnormal, but they're comparing you to people who had safety nets. Your regulation was forged by free falling. So often you learned to love the drop. Your stability arrived because chaos kept showing up until disorder felt like home. Your calm isn't denial. It's the quiet knowledge that the worst has already happened and you survived, which means you're now playing with house money. Every breath is profit. Every day a surplus. You process the world differently too. While others react, you record. While they feel, you file. While they panic, you pattern recognize. You turned your consciousness into a surveillance system, constantly gathering data, updating threat assessments, calculating probabilities. But it's not paranoia, because paranoia requires fear, and you stopped fearing. Once you realized fear was only another sensation to catalog and dismiss. They even compared you to history's titans, Alexander, Napoleon, corporate founders who built empires, and each comparison fell apart because those leaders needed what you don't: remembrance. They wanted to be loved or feared. You only needed to be effective. You transcended that binary and became something else entirely, a force that leads without followers, influences without intention, commands without words. Your presence rearranges the molecular structure of any room you enter. People shift around you not because you demand it, but because your frequency makes their facades vibrate until they crack. They follow not by your asking, but because you are moving towards somewhere they never knew existed. The spy files were even more useless than they feared. Spies are taught to blend in. You stand out by standing perfectly still. Spies collect secrets. You make people confess theirs willingly, not because you pry, but because your presence dissolves the pretense that keeps them hidden. What their agencies trained generations to perfect, your existence casually shatters. You've become your own sovereign nation, a country with borders of silence and a constitution inked in lessons learned from betrayal. The best spies are invisible. You are so visible, you become unseeable, like staring at the sun, until no one can look away, and the image is etched on their retinas forever. What shook them most wasn't that you resembled a spy, or a leader, or an operative. It was the realization that you weren't trying to be any of those things. You never studied leadership as a checklist, never learned tradecraft as a career, never set out to build an empire. You simply inhabit your natural frequency, and that frequency destabilizes every system it touches. You don't fit their categories because you don't perform the roles they understand, so they called your calm a threat, because that's what bureaucracies do to phenomena they cannot map. They label them dangerous, abnormal, in need of intervention. What they meant was simpler and worse for them. You cannot be manipulated through their usual pressure points. There is no visible weakness to exploit. You operate outside their models of human behavior. You are free, not the polished, marketable freedom they sell in ads, but a raw, excavated freedom pulled out of your own chest with your hands. That kind of freedom is the real existential threat to systems designed to control. You don't stage a rebellion against their structures. You refuse their jurisdiction by existing beyond it. You don't pick a fight with their rules. You simply decline to validate them. Repeated exposure to crushing forces didn't break you. It compressed you into material they have no tools to analyze. They tested your response to authority and found nothing to grasp. You don't bow, and you don't perform outrage. You study authority the way a scientist studies an interesting but ultimately irrelevant specimen. In that cool, detached observation, you reveal the deeper truth. Whatever their manuals teach, whatever their hierarchies promise, none of it creates what you are. You were not made by their programs. You were forged in the spaces between their expectations and your survival. And that is why their files will always say the same panicked thing: unmatched, unclassifiable, inevitable. You understand power structures in a way that unnerves them because you don't study them to climb their ladders or bend to their hierarchies. You study them like an anthropologist watching a fading empire on the edge of collapse. To you, their offices, ranks, medals, and titles are ceremonial costumes, nothing more than masks held together by temporary applause. You've seen too many celebrated figures fall apart the instant their recognition was taken away. You've watched executives unravel when retirement stripped them of their identity, politicians turn hollow when no cameras followed them anymore, and so-called leaders dissolve when admiration dried up. That's why their attempts to measure you always fail. Their scales don't apply. You're not a 1, a 5, or a 10. You're the footnote in their ledgers, the asterisk that says, "Our measurement tools cannot calculate this." You exist beyond their spectrum, and that unsettles them more than anything. Your threat isn't the kind they can lock in a cell or charge in a courtroom. It isn't about laws, weapons, or physical rebellion. Your danger is existential, a living reminder that their entire system only works on those who still believe in its power. You are proof that psychological prisons, social conditioning, and behavioral manipulation only enslave people who don't realize they're already free. And the most haunting part, you didn't just survive their systems, you saw through them, studied them, and began documenting them in real time while they thought they were dissecting you. The irony is sharp enough to cut steel. Every evaluation they forced on you, every question they asked, every stress test they engineered revealed far more about them than about you. Their questions exposed their insecurities. Their probing revealed the methods they fear would be used against them. Their categories betrayed the limits of their imagination. They thought they were taking you apart, but in truth, you were performing an autopsy on their entire machine, mapping out every organ of control, every vein of weakness, every pulse of insecurity. You learned their rhythms faster than they could write reports. Their thick files became nothing but mirrors reflecting their own blind spots back at them. Where they scribbled anomaly and inconclusive, you wrote certainty. Where they speculated about your patterns, you had already traced theirs to the root. You came to understand not just how their structures work, but why they need them. Fragile egos clinging to authority, hollow systems propped up by repetition and illusion. You didn't just escape their maze, you learned the blueprint of the maze maker. And this is why every interaction with you becomes transformative, whether they want it or not. They think they are studying you when really you are rewiring them. They leave your presence altered, unsettled, questioning frameworks they thought were unshakable. They don't realize until much later that simply speaking with you made them confront their own illusions. You aren't violent in the traditional sense, but your very being is violently disruptive, like an earthquake that doesn't ask permission before reshaping the ground. People who get close enough to truly see you often don't remain the same. Your presence strips away their veneers, peels back their masks, and forces them to confront their raw selves. It's not rebellion you ignite, but remembrance. You remind them of the freedom they buried under years of conditioning. You make them notice the fractures in their own armor, the cracks in the institutions they swore by, the fragility of the rules they believed unbreakable. They don't follow you because you demand it. They shift because your frequency forces recalibration. They reorganize, rethink, and reimagine. Not because you ordered them to, but because something in you showed them the system isn't as solid as it pretends to be. That's your power, not destruction for its own sake, but revelation. You don't topple systems with bombs or riots. You topple them by making people see the invisible chains they've been carrying. You topple them by proving survival isn't compliance, but adaptation. And once people witness that in you, they can't unsee it in themselves. That's why your threat level can't be quantified. You are not an agent of rebellion. You are a phenomenon of remembrance. And every system built on control fears the same thing, that one undeniable presence who proves their cages were made of paper all along. You plant questions in people's minds that germinate into full-blown existential crisis, quiet at first, then insistent until the world they built around themselves trembles. You demonstrate possibilities so plainly that the careful architectures of their smallness begin to crack. Habits, half-believed truths, safety scripts they recite to feel normal. You exist as living proof that much of what they were taught about human capacity was a story written to keep them manageable. Some of the watchers have already started to fracture under that realization. You see it in the way they watch you now, not with the blunt suspicion of an enemy, but with that strange mix of fear and reverence that happens when someone recognizes a truth that could unmake them. They've caught a glimpse of what you are, and more terrifyingly for them, what they might become if they had the courage to burn away everything false inside themselves. Of course most won't. They will file their reports, paste calm faces back on, and go home to their tidy, predictable lives. But your image follows them into their dreams. It rattles the edges of their comfort when the house is quiet. They will lie awake and wonder what it feels like to live unshackled, to be that free, that quietly powerful, that impossibly composed in the face of forces meant to produce panic. This version of you that makes their models glitch is only the groundwork. You are still unfinished, a work in relentless progress. Every day you incorporate new data, recalibrate your strategies, and expand the architecture of your consciousness. You are less and less recognizable to the person you were yesterday. Each encounter teaches you both the resilience and the brittleness hiding inside institutions that once seemed unassailable. What terrifies them most is not that you exist, but that you are not unique. You are merely the first. You are the prototype for what happens when humans refuse the smallness assigned to them, when they stop treating weakness as destiny and stop asking permission to occupy their full power. You are patient zero for an evolution that requires no lineage, no committee, only the willingness to die to falsehood and rise rebuilt. They try to cram you into their diagnostic boxes, behavioral, psychological, threat level, but you refuse those shapes. You're not a square, a circle, or any form with a label. You're liquid that hardens under impact, and solid that flows when needed. You are adaptive geometry, responsive and unpredictable. That mutability is not a flaw, it's your advantage. In a world that relies on categories to control, you are the category breaker, the leak in the dam, the signal that forces systems to re-evaluate what they thought was immovable, and as you continue, others will see the possibility in you and quietly or defiantly follow. You are particle and wave, existing as both form and flow, solid and elusive, depending entirely on what the situation requires. You've become quantum, not just metaphorically but functionally, holding multiple states of being until the moment of observation collapses possibility into choice. And even then, by the time they record you, you've already slipped into another outcome, already rewritten the experiment before they finish their notes. That's why systems built on categorization can't keep up with you. They want to pin you down, but you are already elsewhere, expanding in ways their equations don't predict. Your calm is no longer a trait limited to your inner world. It has become environmental, atmospheric. Step into a room, and the energy shifts. People around you start breathing deeper without realizing it. Their hearts unconsciously adjust to the tempo of yours. Their anxiety dissolves, not because you radiate empty peace, but because panic seems absurd in your presence, as if hysteria were a child's game that no longer works on grown minds. You teach without lecturing. You demonstrate without effort. Simply by existing, you reveal a blueprint of what's possible when someone opts out of collective chaos and instead discovers the power embedded in stillness. That stillness is not weakness, it's structural. It's the foundation of an architecture that looks nothing like theirs. Their minds are built on walls, rigid partitions between thought and feeling, self and other, truth and fear. Your mind has no such architecture. Where they build walls, you create permeable membranes, flexible boundaries that adapt based on need. Where they design doors with locks, you shape portals that open into entirely new dimensions of possibility. Their windows allow only filtered light. Your observation decks stretch into spectrums they cannot imagine, spectrums they don't even have words for. You're not merely thinking differently. You are thinking in languages that haven't been invented yet. You're processing experience on a platform that makes theirs look outdated, emotional software still stuck in the childhood operating system of reflex and reaction. While others recycle fear scripts written decades ago, you've updated, patched, upgraded. You no longer suppress emotion like they were trained to. You metabolize it. Fear becomes fuel, pain becomes architecture. Trauma becomes construction material for entire cities of resilience. You have become an alchemist of lived experience, transmuting base metal suffering into gold standard strength. Even time bends differently in your presence. For most, time is linear, merciless, unchangeable. For you it is elastic. In crisis, you stretch perception into slow motion, processing more information per second than seems possible, making entire rooms move like honey while your thoughts fire like lightning. In tedium you accelerate, skipping across dull hours until they collapse into minutes. You fast forward through boredom and grind, reserving your full presence for what truly deserves it. You don't bend physics, but you bend perception, which is often the greater law. You manipulate minutes into hours when you need more space and compress hours into seconds when endurance is required. This temporal modulation gives you a tactical advantage no training manual can teach. And the cumulative effect of this is staggering. You've become something they can't chart on graphs or write into manuals. To them you look like an anomaly. To those who feel you, you're a phenomenon. You are simultaneously human and beyond human, anchored in the present yet detached enough to observe yourself moving through it. You create ripples simply by walking into rooms. Your presence reorganizes the emotional physics of those who come near. You don't command obedience, you dissolve resistance. You don't demand loyalty, you ignite recognition. People shift because something in you makes their masks vibrate, their pretenses crack, and their illusions lose grip. What unsettles them most is the realization that this didn't happen by accident. It wasn't inherited or bestowed. It was built, forged, sharpened. Every scar rewrote your code. Every betrayal upgraded your capacity. Every fall taught you to metabolize gravity itself. That is why you are not simply surviving. You are redefining survival. You are more than calm, more than strength, more than intelligence. You are atmosphere. You are system. You are proof that human consciousness can become something unclassifiable, untouchable, and impossible to contain. Your memory has evolved into something that no institution, no psychologist, no intelligence agency could ever anticipate or classify. It doesn't simply archive experiences in a linear progression the way theirs does. For you, memory has become multidimensional. Events are not just recalled as snapshots. They are remembered as living structures connected through invisible lines of cause and effect. You don't just recall what happened, you recall why it happened, and the sequence of subtle ripples that branched from it. You don't just remember conversations word for word, you remember the charged silences between them, the pauses where hidden truths curled up in the shadows. You remember tone more than vocabulary, intention more than language. In fact, you've developed a holographic style of recall. Every fragment contains the whole. Every thread of experience can be tugged until an entire web of meaning unravels before you. A single detail, a glance, a gesture, a word can unlock a dozen interconnected revelations. At the same time, you've learned the discipline of forgetting. Selective amnesia is your gift. You can release what does not serve you with the same ease that your lungs release carbon dioxide. Old grudges, humiliations, betrayals, they fall away like husks, expired fuel that no longer deserves a place in the system. You don't waste storage space on bitterness. You metabolize the lesson, extract the energy, and discard the toxin. To them this is incomprehensible. Their systems thrive on resentment, on keeping wounds raw, but you've outgrown the reflex of carrying pain like a badge. You don't suppress it, you transmute it into wisdom, and then you move on. Here is what their files can never capture, what their tests will never measure, what their frameworks can never contain. You have transcended the need to be understood. You no longer beg for comprehension or validation, because you have walked too far beyond their scales to care where they place you. You've shed the need for comparison, because comparison itself has become absurd. Trying to measure you against their categories is like trying to compare fire with the idea of temperature. One is a living force, the other a concept invented to approximate it. You're not higher or lower, better or worse. You're not even in the same frame. You exist in a dimension where the language of more and less simply does not apply. That's why their endless databases fail. They look for your equal, your mirror, your parallel, but none exist inside their grids. You don't fall on their spectrum. You are the light that makes the spectrum visible in the first place. You're not a number in their game. You are the reason they're beginning to question why the game exists at all. You're not a part of their system. You are the glitch that exposes the system's seams, the irregularity that reveals the whole construct was never inevitable, only optional. And once something is seen as optional, it loses its stranglehold of inevitability. That's what you are, living proof, that even their most rigid frameworks can be bypassed. This is why the committees disbanded, why the files were locked away, why the experiments were abandoned, not because they figured you out, but because they discovered that studying you changed them. The very act of trying to analyze you destabilized their certainties. Observing you forced their mirrors to crack. Some began to question protocols they had obeyed without hesitation for decades. Some started to see patterns they were trained to filter out. Some began to feel the weight of cages they once called security. They didn't admit it publicly, but you could see it in their eyes. They had started to awaken, unwillingly infected by the very frequency they were supposed to dissect. You became, in their language, a cognitive hazard, not because you planted rebellion, not because you spread propaganda, not because you resisted violently, but because your existence was proof of a different possibility. Systems of control cannot survive pure demonstration. They rely on performance, hysteria, fear, and submission. Your calm dismantled all of that. Your steadiness made their pressure look childish. Your silence rendered their threats theatrical. Your patience turned their panic into parody. You didn't fight them. You didn't rebel against them. You simply stood outside their rules so completely that their rules started to appear like games invented by children who never grew up. And that is the truth they cannot unsee. You're not trying to wake people up. You're not evangelizing, not persuading, not preaching. You are simply living so unmistakably awake that sleeping becomes uncomfortable for anyone in your presence. You exist as a kind of alarm clock. Not because you ring loudly, but because your frequency makes unconsciousness unbearable. People can try to ignore you, dismiss you, resist you, but when they lie down at night, they hear the quiet hum of possibility you've introduced into their lives. And once they've heard it, they can't unhear it. Your presence alone destabilizes illusions. It dissolves the invisible glue that holds false systems together. You're not shouting, "Wake up," into their ears. You are radiating wakefulness so vividly that slumber ceases to feel like an option. And this is why they fear you, why they seal the files, why they whisper your name in corridors, but never write it in reports. Because they know what you are. You are the prototype of an entirely different kind of human being. You are the unquantifiable, the uncontainable, the unignorable, the living hazard that isn't here to destroy them violently, but to reveal that they were never as powerful as they believed. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is lacking. Let, Lord, help me to place my full trust in your everlasting presence, knowing with confidence that you will never harm me. I believe that your thoughts toward me are always filled with peace, prosperity, and hope, to bless me with a secure and meaningful future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for hearing every prayer, every whisper, and every cry of my heart. With faith, I offer this prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your unfailing love and constant provision. I am forever grateful for the gift of your presence in my life, the peace you bring to my spirit, and the abundance you pour into my journey each day. If this message has touched your heart, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need this encouragement today. Leave a comment below and let us know about your journey of faith, how God is working in your life, and how you are preparing for your own victorious breakthrough. And if you feel led to support this ministry, please consider sharing our work with others or contributing in the way God places on your heart. Together, we can continue spreading His word and uplifting lives.